folks, how times have changed since our last meeting. I've overused the word unprecedented because each time that I join a different meeting, I still participate in a lot of different boards and having a lot of internal meetings like I'm pretty sure all of us are. We just can't believe that we've been working remotely for the past 2 months. And with a lot of the uncertainty and as folks try to open up their businesses and make adjustments, and these are very, very trying times. And I know that many of you, especially many of our guests on the phone today, through the WebEx, are working around the clock to assist as many as they possibly can. So I just want to start out by saying thank you for all the hard work that everybody's doing in this space. And I know that everybody's doing the best they can. And I'm very thankful to be a part of an organization that is focused on taking care of the citizens here in Georgia. And we'll work through this. You've heard the phrase, we'll get through this together, and we are in this together. And again, I know that as leaders across the state, we're going to do whatever we can to support this process. So a big thanks in advance. Thanks for your endurance. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for your hard work. Thanks for keeping the positive mindset. I could go on and on about all the accolades in terms of what I've seen demonstrated so far. And so just know that as the board chair for the workforce development, I'm really proud of what folks are doing. So I know we've got I think it seems pretty straightforward today. I'll end the meeting today with some things that I think are next steps for us. A lot of information to share. I know that Jodan, Kristen, Nia, and the entire team have been working. A tremendous amount of work has gone into working with the local workforce development areas. I know they are working hard, and I know they're looking for information and guidance and support. And so we're doing everything we can to support everybody. So again, welcome to today's meeting. I believe we'll probably have another opportunity to have this kind of meeting. So get used to it, and we'll learn from this session. And if there's something that doesn't work well, I'll apologize now, but we'll do better next time. But if you have any feedback, please let the team know. We'll try our best to improve on that the next time we get together as a board. So we'll jump right into the agenda. Nia, at any time, stop me or interrupt me if I miss something. If we can, we'll go ahead and go right to the business portion of our agenda. And I know that folks will have to unmute themselves when they weigh in here. If we can, we have up first or the approval of the agenda from the 13th meeting.
I make a motion we approve, Mr. Chairman. This is Ames.
All right, Mayor, thank you. We have a second.
Second from Randy Bill, Building Tricks.
Great. Nia, did you get that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll go to the approval of the November 14th, 2019 minutes from our last meeting. We have a motion to approve.
Motion, Kelly Brownlow.
Need to get that?
We didn't hear the second.
Stuart Count, second.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
All right, any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll move to our next item. The approval of today's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to accept, Sam Dasher.
Second, Ames Barnett.
All right, Nia, you good?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Like sign. All right, thank you. Motion carries. And our last one here is approval of the the February 13th, 2020 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Randy Bill.
I second. Dale Keith.
Nia, are we good?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Any questions or discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Like sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much, folks. So that does it for our main business items from our last meeting. Thank you all very much for helping us to close those out. Next up on the agenda, Nia, we have the committee reports, and first up we have adult and dislocated worker, and I'll turn it over to Karen Vieira.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we did have our Adult and Dislocated Worker Committee meeting on May 6th at 2:30 in the afternoon, and we had quorum. We had a couple of presentations and a great discussion. So the first presentation was an employment network update by Rosani Rios, and she shared with us that the updates on the Employment Network program, where they were created for a 3-year duration for the Disability Employment Initiative. And she shared the success with that program, along with the reimbursement of $52,999 that was received after 2 areas that are active in the program that have 2 MOUs out there, and that's Area 7 and Area 9. And this is the support that they're providing to assist individuals through training and ultimately employment that have the disabilities. So the dollars that were received are not counted as program income, and this allows the local areas to use these dollars for funding sources that are independent from Title I. So Rosani is very hopeful that this documented success will encourage the network to grow and other areas to use this program. So that was Rosani's update on the Disability Employment Initiative that she is overseeing. The next presentation we had was the sector partnership update. Brittany Bullock provided an update for us, and she was discussing the workers' impact of COVID-19, how this has impacted the regional sector partnership, and that they're gearing up to support the state's recovery from the pandemic. The Department of Labor has reported over 1 million unemployment claims through March 14th. And it's requiring the sector partnership to pivot their strategies to best serve the industries in the region. The OWD, Office of Workforce Development, hosted a webinar 2 weeks ago, and they were talking about how the sector partners needed to pivot and what changes to plans they might need to make. So they were given some time, a short period of time, and the information, they're going to revisit their plans to create a 90-day strategy to respond to the community needs. So this plan is to be submitted in the next, I guess it's probably a week because it was 2 weeks at that time. And so that they can ensure the sector partnership would be led by industry and current needs in local communities to respond to the COVID-19 and what has been happening. Clearly, we had no idea this was coming, and the plans that were in place are not adequate to respond to what's happening now. We had a nice opportunity to talk amongst the individuals that were on the phone and really learn about what are those individuals are doing, what are their companies doing to get back to work, what actions were being taken around safety precautions. So we talked a lot about the PPE, personal protective wear for employees, how companies were returning, what social distancing practices were being followed. And I think it was just nice to be able to talk to one another and get a sense of what was going on. So I'll move over to our policy changes. We do have, we actually have 4 policy changes. And Cherie, all of this, sorry, Cherie is going to give us an update on a few of the policies, starting with 331, the individual employment plan. I'll turn it over to Cherie.
Thank you. Good morning. The IEP is a comprehensive employment plan that describes the employment, skills training, and supportive services of an adult dislocated participant, as well as the service strategy that has been developed to meet those needs. And so OWD, we changed this policy in regards to the case file management beginning January 1, 2019, where all documents must be electronic. And so to streamline this process and to reduce the amount of documents that are required to be scanned and uploaded, for our local areas, we updated 3.3.1 to include the original IEP must be signed by both participant and staff and uploaded into the system, the WorkSource Georgia portal, and any additional action steps or goals that are achieved can be updated via case note or rescanned into the system. Any questions? I'll move along to action item 3.3.3, objective assessment.
Hey, Cherie.
Sorry, are you going to vote individually?
Well, but yeah, I want to find out, Kristen, Nia, can we vote on these? Or do we need to vote on these separately?
Yes, sir. You can vote on each committee's pack or each committee's set of policies as a packet.
Okay, great. Continue on, Cherie.
Yes. So 3.3.3, objective assessment. So the objective assessment is a process that collects information upon which participants' individual service strategy and individual employment plan will be based. The IEP policy references completing an objective assessment. However, it was unclear if it was required for adults and dislocated workers. Therefore, we updated that language to reflect that it is required for youth, adults, as well as dislocated workers. We also did some reorganization to separate what's required for youth participants versus what's required for the adult and dislocated participants. And lastly, we moved the statement, monitors will look for the objective assessments during the on-site reviews to the top of the policy, so that way that detail is not missed for our local areas. Any questions? All right, I'll pass it over to Rosani.
Good morning. The next item is policy 3.2.7, strategic populations with barriers to employment. This new addition, the purpose of the addition is to restate that all programs of WIOA Title I must serve individuals with barriers, and that they should design services to help these individuals overcome their respective barriers. Also,
Rosani, I'm sorry, but you're kind of low. Is there any way to speak a little louder or put a headset in? We can really hear you clearly.
Sure. Give me just a second. Let me put my headset.
While we wait for Rosani, Brittany Singer, do you want to start?
Sure. So we can jump ahead to the fourth item, which is 3.2.5. The portion of this policy that we're changing is the priority of service part, but this policy also includes the adult and dislocated worker participant eligibility. However, that piece hasn't changed. So priority of service is a phrase that gets used quite frequently, and the edits that we are proposing to this policy are to clarify what that term means in relation to providing services under WIOA. So part of the edits are to reorganize the policy to flow better and make it easier to understand. And then there are a few key pieces that we've added for clarification. WIOA establishes what they call priority populations for adult funds, which includes recipients of public assistance, other low-income individuals, and then individuals who are basic skills deficient. And then in addition to those WIOA priority populations, we have veterans priority of service for all USDOL funded programs. In implementing WIOA, these priority categories get merged in a particular order to meet the statutory requirements. So we reorganized the policy to lay out what we mean by WIOA priority, and then what is veterans priority, and then how those two merge and are implemented. In terms of the other changes that we added, you'll see added citations for how to define veteran and eligible spouse, just to make it easier to find those definitions. And then the final piece is about how individuals with disabilities are included. We've run into that question quite a bit and wanted to spell it out a little more plainly in the policy. So that concludes the changes to that policy. I'll turn it over to Razani if there aren't any questions.
Thank you, Brittany. Can everybody hear me okay now?
Yes, it's better. Thank you, Rasani.
Okay. Thank you. So I am going to go over policy 3.2.7. This is a new addition, and it just restates the importance for our programs to serve individuals within the strategic populations. That is also important for our local areas to design services that help these individuals overcome their respective barriers. This policy also lists the 16 different categories within strategic populations that the feds have labeled for us. This is not an all-inclusive list. Each local area has the autonomy to include other categories within this list, but we wanted to make sure that we had somewhere in our manual these categories and everybody was clear as to what the categories within the strategic populations were, basically. That's the new addition in policy 3.2.7. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Karen, so we have all 4 items, and
Yes.
at the end of each discussion, there were no questions. Are there any questions on any of these? All right, so we need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve. This is Ames.
This is Rob. I second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Nia, you got that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
All right, any questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Any other questions for Karen or her committee?
Wendell, I just want to thank the committee for showing up and participating with all that I know everyone has going on before we move on.
Great. Well, Karen, thank you for the summary. It sounded like it was very interactive and obviously timely based on things that are happening right now. So thank you and the committee for the work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is Youth Committee. And we'll turn that over to Commissioner Andrews.
I'm muted now, Nia.
You're unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay. It's good to see all of you today. And our youth committee did have our meeting on Tuesday, May the 5th. We did have a quorum. We heard an update from Area 13, East Central Georgia. We had LaTonya Goodwin and Tina Bland, who presented a youth overview highlighting a few of their contractors including one called Broken Shack Ranch, which is a Christian nonprofit who's doing the kind of work that we do, but needed a partnership in order to be stronger. And they reached out to us, and that partnership was created. So now we're assisting them. And also we heard about the Georgia Committee on Employment of People with Disabilities. Their goal is to engage with 90 youth participants, and they're on target with 85 actively enrolled. And we know that Area 13 has had some struggles with credentialing obtainment for their youth, but we received this report that in spite of the barriers that they have and with having a wide geographic area to serve and lack of internet, which we hear over and over in our state, and we must do something about that, they are able to give us these numbers. 66.7% of participants who are ESOL were employed in the second quarter. 100% of single parents were employed the fourth quarter. 100% of married and parenting participants received their youth credentials. 100% of youth engaged in the criminal justice system were employed in the fourth quarter. And Area 13 also talked about their certificate that they are offering under the National Retail Federation, which is a sales certificate, which has a lot of job opportunities with that certification. So it was good to hear from Area 13, to hear about their struggles, and also to hear about their successes. We bring to the committee today 4 action items. Cherie is going to go over the first one, and then Ben Lanier will go over the last 3, and then we will bring those changes to you in a motion from the youth committee for approval. So Cherie, we'll go to you first.
Thank you, Dr. Andrews. The first action item is the individual service strategy, and that's section 3.3.2. So the individual service strategy, also referred to as an ISS, is a comprehensive service plan based on the results of the objective assessment. And this describes the employability, the academic, skills training, and supportive services needed for the youth participant, as well as the steps to develop and achieve those employment goals. So local workforce development areas are required to review the ISS at least quarterly and update as needed. However, since the approval for case management, where all documents must be electronic, really to streamline this process and reduce the amount of documents that are required to be scanned and uploaded, for our local areas, we've updated section 3.3.2 to include the original ISS must be signed by staff and participant and scanned into the Georgia WorkSource portal. However, we added that those quarterly reviews that are required can be done with updating those case notes or updating additional documentation. Any questions on 3.3.2? I will pass it to Ben Lanier.
Thanks, Cherie. Good morning, everybody. So based on our last federal monitoring, it was basically suggested that we needed to beef up our youth policies to be more in line with national best practices. And so the changes that I'm going to present today seek to bring us in line with that goal. The first 3.4.1.5 is a very small addition to the general work experience policy that basically just adds that we are adding a full youth WIC section and tells you where to go for that. So the big change is 3.4.2.3. We have included specific language that provides more detail on things like summer work experience, pre-apprenticeship programs, internships, job shadowings, and even OJT opportunities for youth. We also included a local policy section that establishes what the local areas must include in their specific youth work experience policies. It doesn't add anything new that we expect of local areas as far as work experience, but we wanted to make sure that in our youth work experience section that we included specific youth work experience elements that are required of the locals. And then next, for the update to our youth participant eligibility, so this is 3.2.6. WIOA actually allows a low income exception where 5% of WIOA youth may be participants who ordinarily would be required to be low income for eligibility. And WIOA actually gives the power to the state to define the parameters for this, requires additional assistance definition, or it allows the states to let the locals have the autonomy to decide. And that has been our position for the past few years. But we did some research into our local areas, and the majority of them had not defined it at the local area. So we're providing a definition now for those youth who would be eligible under that requires additional definition. And we're using a definition that was basically provided to us directly from the feds. So we're comfortable that this definition is helping to set a national.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Sheree. So, Mr. Chairman, we bring these 4 committee action items to you from the youth committee. If there are no other questions.
Okay.
I'll make a motion from the youth committee.
We have a motion.
I'll second. Ames Barnett.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Nia, you got that?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
All right. Any questions or discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, like sign. All right. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Andrews. We appreciate the hard work that you and your committee have done as well.
The committee's great and the staff is wonderful. We appreciate them.
Thank you very much. And very nice seeing you this morning.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Let's move on to our next committee update, this Performance and Accountability Committee. Dr. Wilburn, I think you're going to be handling this for us. If he's speaking, we can't hear him.
Sounds like they're doing good, Mr. Chairman.
Did we lose Dr. Wilburn?
We can't find him in the attendees so far. Can I ask either Brittany Singer or Stephen Wilson to step in and give the update?
Hey, Chris, and this is Brittany. I can give it. I'm going to apologize. My dogs have decided they want to join our meeting here. So if you can hear them, I do apologize. So our committee met on Tuesday. The date, we did have quorum. It was the 5th. We did have quorum. We had one policy that Rosani will go over, but before we do that, I provided a couple updates for our committee about some things that we've got going on the compliance side of the house. So our non-discrimination plan is up for updates to be submitted to the U.S. Department of Labor Civil Rights Center. And just as a quick refresher for everyone, this is required by WIOA that our office maintains the non-discrimination plan. This plan describes the state's actions to ensure equal opportunity and non-discrimination requirements of WIOA are met as we implement Title I programs and services across the state. So this plan undergoes a review every 2 years that allow for updates to reflect our current efforts. We are in that process right now. We did a fairly extensive updating when we transitioned the grant from GDEC to TCSG, so the plan doesn't need much in the way of updates this time. However, the main change that we're making is to update the list of local equal opportunity officers. Other than that, there are some links that need replaced, some minor changes, but that is in the works. This item doesn't require a vote, but if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The second update that we gave, Melly's going to give a more in-depth monitoring summary later on in the meeting, but just as a quick update, we were able to complete our on-site monitoring of local areas prior to this COVID-19 crisis. So right now we're working through the closeout period. We have 7 out of 19 areas that are still open with anywhere from 1 to a handful of findings that still need to be resolved. And under normal circumstances, we would require that all areas be closed out by the end of the program year, which is June 30th, or they would incur a renewed finding in the next monitoring year. We're kind of looking at that on a case-by-case basis and extending deadlines as necessary, just because with staff teleworking and, you know, normal processes being interrupted, some of those corrective actions that we've assigned are a little bit delayed in getting completed. But we're in good shape to wrap up PY 18 monitoring, and we'll continue to work with those local areas to resolve those findings and adjust deadlines as needed. But like I said, we're in good shape to wrap everything up. And those are the only updates we had for our committee. I'll take any questions about that, and if there are none, I'll hand it over to Rosani for the policy. Thank you, Brittany. I am going to move forward with the next action item, policy 5.4.5, confidentiality and security. The purpose of this confidentiality policy is to provide additional guidance and structure to the local areas when creating confidentiality policies at the local level, as well as to provide them with the proper steps to follow when storing this information. We wanted to give them more guidance and structure. I presented this policy once before in our last state board meeting. The main change from my previous presentation to today is that we have removed the language that makes reference to the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. After careful consideration, the FERPA, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, is more related to the Department of Education than workforce. Therefore, we have decided to take that language of the policy and just stick with the regulations provided by USDOL. And that's the main change to the to this proposed policy. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, so we need a motion at this point.
Kelly Brown.
Sorry, so moved, Randy Bill.
Okay, Nia, did you get that?
I believe so. Did I hear Kelly give the motion and Randy give the second? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right, great. Any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 First of all, I more than likely, look, you was up.
Okay, any opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much, Brittany, Rosani, and get Dr. Wilburn back eventually, or did we just lose him completely?
He sent an email out. I just got it, said he was muted, Mr. Chairman, but he can.
Dr. Wilburn is on, but he is listed as a call-in user, and so he can only talk when we manually unmute everybody.
Oh.
So we're manually unmuting everyone for the vote, but otherwise we've got everyone muted, and so that's the issue. But Dr. Wilburn's here.
Okay. All right. Well, I know you can hear us, Dr. Wilburn. Thank you for your working with the committee as well. So, folks, thank you all for working on that. All right, Financial Oversight Committee, Mayor Barnett.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Hey, y'all got to excuse me. These Zoom meetings give a real strong Southern accent for some reason, but we don't know where it comes from. But it has to be through the internet. Coming out of rural Georgia is what we think. To start out, the good news was Georgia was doing so great before the virus. that our funds were cut based on our numbers of unemployment and the amount of Georgians working. So out of all the good jobs and good success, allowed funds to be cut. And right after that done, then the virus hits. And so now we need more funds than we did, but that's the way it is. It seems like that was a 14% decrease in our funds. And now they're having to, through the budget process, which is going to be difficult, having to deal with more areas needing more money, but at the same time, budgets being cut. The good news is our money comes from the federal government and not the state of Georgia budget. And so the state of Georgia is struggling now. Areas should be fine since there's federal dollars coming down. That's a big deal. They did get an emergency grant for $12 million, and that money is being distributed to the local areas. Serena told us that, they're working network procedures, remote procedures, still able to handle financial duties of the office and taking care of that. It's not the best thing, but that's the cards they being dealt, and that's what the cards they playing, and they seem to make it happen, and assured us of that. And they just completed a bunch of internal review, and the big thing about that is some of the grant funds may be close to expiring, and they're really monitoring those grants, helping the local areas with the grants that could be expiring, so those funds do not have to go back. So that's kind of one of their main focuses, and it's really focused on the ones that may expire soon. And if y'all remember, as a board, some of the local areas who wouldn't spend funds, we would recapture those funds from a local area and distribute it to another area that needed more funds. So in example, one area 13 may not need all its youth money. We would recapture it, send it to maybe Decatur or DeKalb for more youth to serve. Now through the virus, that any unspent funds within that local area are going to stay with that local area through this, because we pretty much know they're going to need those funds. So that recapture is not going to be done. But I think that'll be a commitment and accountability that those funds will not have to go back to the federal government, because they will spend them in those local areas. Once the fund has also been received, youth grant contracts, those funds will be distributed. And one of the spotlights was LaTonya gave us this, and first, LaTonya does an awesome job. She is like the superstar, and I've heard her name come up once or twice already. And she does a good job. But DeKalb County, on the spotlight of our call, is serving 800 kids through a virtual summer employment area youth for DeKalb County youth. So that's 800 youth that's getting served with a spotlight. And then East Central Georgia, which is area 13, there's a bunch of youth programming that's going into a local perfumery operation, which is actually in Hancock County, Georgia. And if y'all don't know, that's probably one of our poorest counties of the state. And to those people to get served and have job opportunities is a big blessing to that county, and especially those citizens that live in Hancock County. But the Cliff Notes version is budget's going to be tight. Success has cost us, but they're going to get through it. We're going to get through it. The local areas are going to fight through and get through it, but we've not have sent any funds back to the federal government. Extra funds are staying with the areas to be respent on different projects, and all in all, it's good. We have no action items to be taken up. And I want to thank everybody in the office for doing a good job. And doing budgets about like a root canal. Nobody wants to do it, but you got to get it done. And telling people you don't have any more money, this is all you're getting, is not fun. But thank y'all for what you do.
Mayor, thank you very much. I love your analogies. Just love them.
And Mr. Chair, we will have one action item out of this committee. Okay. The local carryover amount will need to be voted on. But just real quick, you're seeing the PY 2020, FY 2021 budget on there, but not listed as an action item. So because of just some delayed numbers coming from the feds, and then just other things that need to be worked out to to get a final budget. This will need to be taken up by the executive committee at some point in June, and then the full board will affirm the vote on that budget in August. But as Mayor Barnett alluded to, we did take some cuts. Unfortunately, the data that gets us our allocation, our federal allocation, ends in December. And so up until that point in the state, all of our data was very rosy, which elicited a $5.6 million cut, about 7% of the overall budget, which, if you remember from last year as well, we had another $5 million cut last year. So the local areas have had to kind of deal with this every year. So while that's not an action item right now, we did just want to let everyone know kind of what we were looking at. But obviously that budget will be coming to you guys at a later point. The actual action item is what Mayor Barnett talked about with the carryover amount. Typically, if local areas do not spend or obligate at least 80% of their first year funds, that amount is subject to carryover. If again, you remember this from last year when we were talking about this, at any given point, a local area has 3 years worth of funding that they have to prioritize and get spent to different levels. When the coronavirus hit, it just really messed up budgeting in the local areas. In some areas, they were way overspending. In some areas, they were way underspending. If you think of summer youth programs and those availabilities, some of those are completely on hold. And then you hear of some in DeKalb County that are now have local funds being put towards that because they've expanded it so much. So it just made budgeting for our folks very tough. And so to accommodate for that, what we ask the local areas to do is to make sure that they completely spent down all third-year funds and all second-year funds, and that we would go to the board and ask for an exemption for first-year funds with the 80% rule. So we do need an official vote. It's nothing in your packet. It's just to allow the local areas, or allow us to not complete the recapture process this year, and these funds will definitely be needed in all 3 categories by the local areas for this next year.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman, my agenda's over. But the only question on that motion is, do we need to put a year onto the motion for 2020 funds, or a year 2 or 3 funds during this process? But if not, I think.
Yes, sir, we can add that here specifically to the motion to put to just have this affect year 1 funding.
Sounds good.
So Mayor, do you want to make that as your motion?
Yes, I'll make that as my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a second?
Second, Randy Thomas.
Thank you. Is there any question or discussion about this motion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Motion carries. I said motion carries. Thank you very much. If you didn't hear me, sorry. And Mayor Barnett, thank you very much for your work on that. I know the teams, that is a big one. And I know that the team has been working with the local areas and will continue to work with local areas. Local areas still have questions, and I know we're working on those as well. So a lot of moving parts. This is, again, the world completely changed at the beginning of March for everyone. And so the key thing is that folks are working on it, and we'll get to questions that are being brought up by the local areas. But I know that there's still a lot of work in front of us. All right, we'll move on to our next item from the executive committee. Obviously, we've been working. I've asked the executive committee to be on standby in the event we needed to do things during this pandemic, and they've been very supportive. And I know there's a lot of hard work that's been going on, making sure that the committees are functioning during this time, and that we're responding to the needs of our local areas, and we'll continue to do that. And so two items we have. We'll start with the state plan. Brittany, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in February, the state plan came down from the 30-day public comment period. The timing did not work out for us to have a meeting to get a full board vote. So the state plan was instead presented to the executive committee for approval in order to submit it to USDOL by the March 1st deadline. Just as an update, since that submission to the feds, we've received some requested edits from USDOL that between our office and then the partners, we completed and submitted back to the feds on May 6th. There are likely more edits that they're going to request just based on the way that they've done this in the past. It's usually sort of a back and forth asking for clarification or additional narrative. So we anticipate that we'll continue to hear from them. But at this time, we're requesting a vote from the full board to affirm the executive committee's approval of the plan. And I can answer any questions if there are any.
So we'll open it up. Are there any questions right now on the process? I know it's not a new process to us, and this will be, as you brought out, Brittany, going through some iterations, but are there any questions before we vote on the executive committee's approval for this? Or really, it's our approval as a board. All right, so I need a motion on the floor to approve?
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman. This is Ames.
All right, thank you.
This is Tom Cook, second.
All right, any questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Nia, what's the next item is it the ETPL policy, I believe?
Yes, it is.
That's Steve Wilson. Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Back in February, the executive committee approved some minor changes to our eligible training provider list policies. The highlights, there were three main changes. One was bringing the performance measures that we hold our providers to up to date and more in line with the WIOA measures. Second was changing the review period from every 2 years to every year. So we'll be looking at provider performance every year instead of every 2 years. And then third, we're wanting to emphasize the responsibility of our training providers to provide our local areas and the state with performance data on their programs for all participants, as well as our WIOA participants. Those were the main changes. The executive committee approved it back in February, and we're just asking the full board to affirm their approval. Are there any questions?
All right, doesn't sound like it. So I need a motion on the floor.
This is Karen. I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll make the second. This is Ames.
Thank you, Mayor. So we'll open up any questions or discussion. Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, like sign? Motion carries. You're getting better at that, Nia. That was pretty good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Brittany and Stephen, for going through that, covering that for the board. All right. Our next item is the PY18 monitoring summary.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Melly Napolitano. I'm on the compliance team, and today I will be presenting the PY18 monitoring summary report. I will give you an introduction, followed by our approach and methodology, monitoring results, and then our consolidated monitoring summary. Just for a little bit of an introduction, annual on-site monitoring encompasses financial, programmatic, and compliance reviews of the local administration and service delivery process. OWD monitors as a federal requirement of the WIOA grant agreement, and we monitor to ensure that local areas are complying with all local policies,
state rules and regulations, and to ensure that we are providing the best possible programming to participants across the state. Our monitoring process starts off with 4 to 5 weeks of pre-planning, during which time we submit the data request, we pull the sample selection, and we have the pre-planning meeting. Next, we have our on-site monitoring, which lasts 2 to 5 days, depending on the number of samples we pull and the number of interviews we have to conduct while on site. And that on-site monitoring visit concludes when we present the notice of findings and required actions to the local area. Over the next 1 to 2 weeks, the local area responds to that NFR, and then we create the final monitoring report. Finally, in the next 3 to 12 weeks, we have the corrective action response period, and during that time, we work with the local area to make sure that they resolve all findings so that we can close them out for that program year. While this is going on, we do monitor all of the 18 other areas, and we conduct project management and technical assistance based on prior and current year findings and observations. So we wanted to show you what our risk assessment looks like, and we use these risk assessments to determine and identify what areas will be low risk, medium risk, or high risk, and based off of that identification, we know how many samples to pull and how many interview questions to ask from our tools. The finance, compliance, and programs teams look at slightly different risk criteria. So here we have our financial risk criteria. They look at factors such as prior year findings and observations, size of award, any turnover in local staff, any history of suspected fraud, and unresolved prior year findings. Next, we have programmatic risk criteria, and they look at some of the same factors as well as local administrative structure and average spend per participant, percentage growth of participants in the past 12 months, and any late items, for example, on the local plan, board certification and recertification, etc. Finally, here's our compliance risk criteria. And again, we look at many of the same factors. One new thing is the equal opportunity and general complaints during the program year. We also look at those. This slide compares our PY17 and PY18 local area risk assessments. So you'll see how many areas each team identified as low, medium, or high last program year and this program year. But the next slide is more of a visual representation of this information for PY18. So you'll see that in PY18, the finance team identified 63% of the local areas as low risk, whereas the programs team identified 47% of the areas as medium risk, and the compliance team also saw about 53% of the areas as medium risk. Next, we have some monitoring highlights from each of the teams. So the finance team saw that a recurring financial issue was grant funding and subrecipient or vendor contracts that have expired prior to the completion of corrective action directives from previous monitoring seasons. The team provided targeted technical assistance to address processes and requirements for subrecipient monitoring and increased technical assistance regarding budgeting from the team. On the programs team, the team conducted an electronic case file review for all monitoring samples, which allowed for a more comprehensive visit. OWD required the local areas to attend OWD-led training as a corrective action condition for issues identified as recurring findings. And finally, on the compliance team, our team managed the implementation of a new, shorter on-site monitoring process, which reduced travel and extra staff time. So we are still conducting all the same tools as in previous years, but we're taking on more of a desk review for travel reasons. Additionally, the compliance team is developing TA resources and trainings on topics such as local board operations, subrecipient monitoring, and equal opportunity. Here we have an overview of PY18 monitoring findings. So you'll see across the state, the finance team had a total of 5 findings, the programs team had a total of 20 findings, and the compliance team had a total of 29 findings. It is important to note that in the compliance category, we have this corrective action response implementation finding, and that encompasses any repeat findings from the previous year, which can include finance programs or compliance findings. And that does impact this final total number being 29 findings across the state. Here on this chart, we look at PY 17 and PY 18 financial monitoring findings. There was a decrease in the number of contracting findings from 14 findings in PY 17 to 3 findings in PY 18. And a lot of those findings last year were contracts that still had WIA language that needed to be changed to WIOA. So our team and the local areas worked to resolve all those findings and change those languages in the contracts. And so they did see a decrease in contracting findings this year. Here we have the PY 17 and PY 18 programmatic monitoring findings. So you'll see that the most common finding this year was in the programmatic administration category. And that finding encompasses a variety of conditions, including missing documentation, which was the most commonly issued finding in this category in PY 18. Finally, here are the PY 17 and PY 18 compliance monitoring findings. So again, you'll see that the most common finding was that corrective action response finding, and that can be any repeat finding from the previous year from the finance, compliance, or programs team. The second most common finding was the local workforce development board review finding, and there are various reasons for this type of finding, including board composition, meeting attendance, or conflict of interest forms. So we are working to provide technical assistance on local boards requirements so that all local boards can meet all of these requirements and be in compliance with those. All right, over the next few slides, we will be looking at the state area by area on the various charts. So we just wanted to provide this map to you all to remind you where the various areas are located throughout the state. PY 17 and PY 18 findings per area. So the PY 17 numbers are shown in navy and the PY 18 numbers are shown in orange. And you'll see here that some areas had a few more findings than the previous year, some areas had a few less, and some areas remained about the same. FY19 and PY 18 allocation per local area. So the FY19 numbers are shown in navy, the PY 18 numbers are shown in orange, and the way that the WIOA grant funding works is that the adult and dislocated worker grants are distributed, the fiscal year funding is distributed in October of each year, and the program year funding is distributed in July of each year. Whereas all of the youth grant funding is considered PY funding, and that is allocated in April of each year. So OWD determines allocation based on numerous factors, including participant count, which we will see in the next slide. Here we have PY 17 and PY 18 participant count by local area. PY 17 is in navy, PY 18 is in orange, and you'll see that participant counts remain fairly stable across the state from PY 17 to PY 18. PY 18 monitoring summary. So in the next slide, the information that I'll show you will provide a high-level understanding of the state's operating environment and PY 18 performance. Summary of statewide statistics. On the left-hand side, we have allocation data, and on the right-hand side, we have participant data. So again, those FY and PY numbers, the FY19 numbers for all adult and dislocated worker grants are distributed in October of each year, whereas the program year funding for those grants is allocated in July of each year. The reason why there are $0 in the FY19 category for the youth grant is because all of those dollars are considered PY funding and they are allocated in April of each year. So in FY19, we allocated about $37,688,000 to the local areas, and in PY18, we allocated about $29,394,000. On the right-hand side, we have participant data, and in PY18, we served a total of 20,835 participants, which was an increase from PY17 when we served 20,589 participants. And those numbers are broken down by adult dislocated worker and youth participants below. So we will be sending you via email a breakdown area by area of this allocation data and participant data. But this concludes my presentation for today. So are there any questions that I can ask regarding, that I can answer regarding the presentation? Yes.
How will you monitor each area to ensure that they are making corrections on those findings, that they're addressing whatever the concerns are, so that there will be a reduction in the number of findings, especially where there were quite a few in some areas?
Yes. Well, it's a good question. You know, over the past few years, we've seen a reduction in these findings. As the findings come, we consider the findings on a case-by-case basis, while also looking at the grand scheme of things, what's going on across the state. But the particular team, we have a finance, compliance, and a programs person who goes on site to each of these areas. So just depending on what that finding is, it's mandatory that they complete the corrective action by the closeout of the year. In a few exceptions, and like Brittany mentioned earlier, we are definitely monitoring the COVID situation to see if we need to grant extensions past the closeout of the year in order to close out these findings. But resolving the findings is mandatory, and then we go on to provide more technical assistance and make sure that the area knows how to prevent these findings from happening in the future.
I think it would be for us if we see, are the findings the same ones from year to year?
Do you mean it would be helpful for the board to see that?
Board, yeah. Well, it would help pinpoint, especially if we saw the same finding across the state occurring in every area, then that would let us know it was a systemic problem, perhaps, and not just an area problem.
Hey, Dr. Andrews, this is Brittany Singer. So we can put that information together on a more granular level if you'd like to see those findings. Most often they're in the same category, as you can see from some of the slides that Melly put together here. But like that for programs, the programmatic administration, usually the findings are a little bit different. Just it could be any number of policy findings, but we'll break that down for you guys to show you what we're seeing year by year. We can do the last 2 years. But that is an instance, if we saw a finding that is happening over and over again, that's where we would do like a statewide training on, whatever that topic is. So for example, Melly talked about on the compliance team, we see a lot of local board issues with things like attendance and their bylaws. So we've actually put together some training for local boards to talk about best practices and requirements. But we can get you that information on a more detailed level to show you all what we're seeing.
Well, I don't necessarily need for you to bring it back to this board overall, but if you do see those that are statewide or that occur over several areas, then I think those would be the ones that we would be interested in to see if we could assist them in resolving that as a state.
Yes, ma'am. When we do the August meeting, I'll probably have another update for you all, so I'll make sure to cover that information there. Usually at the end of the monitoring season, we kind of look for that information again, so I'll be sure to present that as well.
Okay, thank you both. Are there any other questions on the presentation?
Yeah, this is Ames. I got a question, Mr. Chairman. Could we, or maybe for me, there's an average cost per participant to train. whether it's youth, dislocated, adult, based on dollars and the amount they serve per district or per area. And with the new economy, new Zoom, and reduced funds, but more people, how we can, we may have to change how we do it to get our average cost per participant down so we can train more with the amount of dollars we have. And I imagine we're going to have to challenge our local areas to do that. And, as I just mentioned, some of these areas, the local elected officials coming to meetings and this and, because I don't know what's going on, it's probably going to be up to us as a board to probably help them, some of our business experience, to get our average cost per participant down. I mean, if we cut it by 1%, we can serve one more mom and dad to get a job and help a kid. So that would probably be a challenge to Atlanta, and then let's try to challenge these local areas to, the whole world's changing. We got to change too. If not, Georgia's going to be left behind.
Got it. Good point, Mayor Barnett. We appreciate the question, and I think that's something we definitely can take a look at, and we'll be interacting with the local areas as well. And I'm sure just some of the preliminary things that I've seen and heard, they are trying to look at those things, and but it would be nice to get a report out on that to see how we're doing. So most definitely, and I think that also ties in with some of the things that we want to talk about in our August meeting.
Yes, sir. Hi, Wendell. This is Kristen. If you remember, during our November meeting, we did a presentation on cost per participant for last year. We can resend that presentation that we did because of how financial closeout happens, and then also participant performance and like what those dates look like. August meetings are actually the final numbers that we need aren't closed out at that point because of just things with the fiscal year and everything. So we can resend the cost per participant from the previous year, but for this current year that we're in, the soonest we would be able to present numbers would be the November board meeting. But we can certainly make that kind of a reoccurring thing that we present every November.
Yeah, Chris, and I think that makes sense. And I think those are some of the things that we want to make sure occur on a regular basis. And just to make sure everybody also appreciates the fact that pulling that, it's not just as simple as it being apples and apples completely and running a report that says that one area is higher than another, that it's automatically because they're inefficient or not doing things right. We will work on those details so that we get a fair representation of what's happening within each of those areas. But those are all the right kind of questions that we're looking. We want to make sure we're doing everything we possibly can, and being able to demonstrate it that way would be a very good thing. So I think the thoughts, the questions are definitely right on point, and I know everybody wants to make sure we're doing everything we can throughout the state.
Absolutely, sir. And I would definitely say that that whole 3 years worth of funding at one time really makes that a difficult number to look at. But yeah, we can resend the report from November, Mayor Barnett.
And I'm not saying one area is good or bad. I just think, the numbers are the numbers, and we got to measure by something. And I'm on meeting LaTonya next week to we talked about profit, nonprofit, and going over some of that stuff too. So, hey, if I can help in any way, let me know.
Most definitely.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
So any other questions for Melanie? Great. Thank you, Melanie. Last item, I think we're at the last item. It's got adjournment announcements. And I guess, Joe Dan, can I turn over to you for a few minutes, if you don't mind?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to speak. The chairman had asked me a little earlier to go over a little bit with the board on how the staff has responded to the pandemic. And I just want to start that out by just saying I have never been so proud of a group of people as I am right now. There was, as you remember, back in March when all of this sort of first imploded onto us, everybody as a society. there was no drop in anything. The staff very quickly moved their operations to a remote setting. And yes, there were a lot of little things that happened that caused a lot of angst and some frustration, but all that was just worked through step by step and piece by piece. And I do not see a drop in that. And I'd like to also point out that that same very professional response to this occurred at all 19 of our local areas. I'm very happy that we've pointed out on several occasions here, Miss Latanya, and how she's a workforce warrior and does such great work and just keeps hammering away until she can make something happen that improves the lives of our citizens. But that's I think we can express that with all of the directors and staffs at each one of the local areas. They have done exactly the same thing. They've stepped up, figured out how we can continue working. Of course, there are a lot of things that just had to stop, but I think I can very comfortably say to you that the functions of workforce development in Georgia have continued to work. One of the interesting things is since I've been involved with workforces is this strengthening collaboration with our sister agency, the Georgia Department of Labor. As you know, we have a subcontract with them with rapid response. In this responding to this pandemic, that you'll see that we will actually strengthen that partnership as we move forward, working with the emergency centers and trying to get help to the citizenry that's been most negatively impacted by the pandemic. So in summary, not to keep you guys any longer than we have to, I want to say that you can be proud of the way the system as a whole has stepped up and made everything continue to function. The biggest thing for me is I'm an extrovert. If you know anything about the Myers-Briggs type indicator, I'm an extrovert. So my batteries are running flat out low most of the time because I usually recharge in the company of people. So for other people who are in that same boat, you're just like me. I can't wait till we can get back to a little bit more normal setting. But as the TCSG Commissioner Dozier has said on several occasions in our staff meetings, what we're going to be in the future, we're not really sure right now, but it is probably going to be a little bit different than the way things were. We'll just have to approach it. And we're already working out how we're going to be moving staff very slowly, commencing with the senior level, into the office maybe once or twice a week. And that's going to probably be happening towards the end of this month. But we're staying in close contact with the governor's office and all of the medical scientists and data to make sure that we do not cause anybody any harm. The safety of each and every person is paramount in our minds and in all of our planning and moving forward. Mr. Chairman, did that answer the mail for you, sir?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate to your point, what you and your team were doing. And I know this is a big adjustment for all of us, and it will continue to be an adjustment for all of us. And we'll try to incorporate or implement things that we feel is going to help us as we go through this process. So, and doing what we're doing today, having a virtual meeting, board meeting, is just one of those steps. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a, first of all, we've demonstrated that we can do it. And so when we need to, we'll definitely take advantage of the opportunity. And I think to give us more certainty about sticking to our plans, we'll be able to execute those plans from a standpoint of folks working on different initiatives and getting approvals and gaining understanding. So this is a process we'll most likely utilize until we reach that point where we're very comfortable doing more of the socializing with social distancing. So and all of us are becoming very familiar with new terms, and I think that will just continue to be a thing that we live with here for quite a while. Before I check on any other announcements, are there, I know we went through the material and information was sent in advance, and I appreciate everybody's engagement and support. Are there any just general questions, things that we may not have hit that may be on the minds of some of the board members? If they would, please speak up if you have any general questions.
Kelly Brownlow here, and I have been privately messaging with Joe about what the discussion is around either at the federal level or the state level, what the work of workforce development looks like as we come out of COVID-19. And just, Joe, if you want to share a little bit of kind of what we've been messaging about, I think we're probably going to, it'll probably be a bigger topic in the future, but I was just wondering if there was any discussion already.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I kind of mentioned a little bit about our strengthening collaboration with Georgia Department of Labor, and we are probably going to be working closely with Georgia Department of Health as we move forward. Georgia Department of Health has to or has been tasked with the contact tracing throughout the state, and so they're going to need a lot of support as we move forward, and we're looking into how that might work out. That's going to take more than one state agency to make that happen, and so we're looking into now to see what's the best way that workforce can assist with that in any way. Georgia Department of Labor may be involved, a lot of other agencies as well. So we are looking forward to what will need to be done in order to help with the working our way. The emergency response centers, you know, we've focused on some more short-term assistance with the people who've been negatively impacted and laid off in that regards. We're hoping, you know, I personally am hoping that a lot of the people that are laid off, it's a temporary thing, and that possibly as the economy begins to heat back up and get rolling again, they'll be rehired. It's an unfortunate fact that probably there's going to be a good number of companies or individual companies that do not survive, and so they're not going to be able to rehire, obviously. And so some of those people that are in that category will definitely need a lot of assistance in getting reemployed. Some of them are going to maybe look to how they can reprogram themselves and maybe get into an industry that might be more crisis adverse than the one that they were in. I don't know what that is. I think the pandemic is going to end up impacting everybody as we move forward. But certainly things like the healthcare community is, you know, they're in dire need of more people to work in there. And we as a system have started looking at things like a nursing reentry program. A lot of nurses, through whatever, you know, life, family, whatever, they've allowed their licensure or their registry to lapse. And a lot of them are being called and asked if they can come back. And a lot of them are looking and saying, yeah, maybe I do want to come back in nursing field. Well, if you've let that lapse, there's not a whole lot of options for how you can get back in, but we're creating with the Georgia Board of Nursing a short-term path for them to get back. That may be something that workforce and the workforce local areas may be able to assist with. But again, that's just one area, but it's an example of how we're trying to dig into the details and help each of the individuals. And it's the individual citizens of Georgia that WIOA is focused on by law, and by rights. That's where we should aim. But by byproduct of that, we also need to look to the industry and see how we can help them as well. So all of that to say, I think the bottom line is the work of WIOA is going to be in greater demand as we move forward and move out of the pandemic and get back to a more steady and robust economy. Ma'am, does that cover our discussion? I'm looking back at the notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. Does that cover?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, thank you for asking that. And for the whole board, thank you for all your service on the board. It doesn't, I mean, what you're doing has to be done in order for the work that I've just talked about and all of the committees have just talked about. None of that can happen without this state workforce board. And we greatly appreciate your support all the way through. So thank you. Mr. Chairman, unless somebody else has any questions, that's all I have.
Thank you, Jody.
Chairman Dallas, I had just a two-part question, or I guess it's more sharing of thoughts, but the last meeting we were at, we talked about some of the initiatives such as the internet that might drive us forward. We recognized that our unemployment was extremely low at that time and didn't really know what was going to hit us. And I know funding was cut. So I guess the one part, and this is, I'm sure, too early to answer the question, but maybe we could talk about it as we go forward, is what will happen with those initiatives, such as creating improvements in the internet. Will we still be able to fund some of those initiatives? I don't expect you to be able to answer it now because this is all too new. And the second thing I think we need to think about is I believe that companies are going to start creating jobs that are more remote, 100% remote roles. So we need to think about some of our programs, some of our training for folks that are looking for employment. Do they have the ability to use the web? Do they know how to get on conference calls? Just the things that will allow them to be employable in a remote role, and some initiatives around preparing folks for a different type of work environment. So I don't really need answers to those. I just things to think about. And I know we can't answer it now, but just I would want to put those two items on our improvement opportunities, on our what great programs and initiatives we have in showcasing that through the improved internet opportunities or web opportunities, and our changing environment for programs that will address the needs for folks that may have opportunities remotely that aren't prepared in the future.
Well, Karen, thank you very much for the questions and really, and also the statements. And you're right. I mean, at this point, it is still very early, and we're trying to figure those things out. And I would assume, I know we're doing the same thing right now in terms of the reentry efforts. What are we doing today that we may be able to sustain going forward? What become new requirements? A lot of companies are asking those questions at the same time, trying to help existing companies get back up and running. And so we sort of have both of those converging on each other here. But I think both are things that we need to be looking at and understanding throughout. And I think we'll gain more insight as we go forward. But yeah, definitely very appropriate topics for us that we should be looking at and trying to figure out what are we doing as a result of what the need is. And this is what you brought up is a great segue into what I think we're going to end up discussing in our August meeting. And if there are no other questions, I'd like to go ahead and jump into that before I adjourn our meeting today. But I'll give a second. Okay. For August, if you remember back in, I guess it was many months ago, February, we asked the question about supporting our retreat in Augusta. And we got a lot of favorable response, and I'd be there, and it was really great. Then COVID-19 hit a month later, and the whole world changed on us. And while we're at this point, we don't foresee being able to go there physically to be able to do the retreat for a lot of reasons. And I think the smart thing to do is to plan on utilizing this venue to allow us to do that. We will do some sort of retreat activity. And it goes to the point of some things that Mayor Barnett raised earlier, things that Karen was just asking about, and Kelly, you as well. What are we doing? What's happening? Are we having to make adjustments or changes? Are we supporting the local areas as they make adjustments and changes? What's being required today? And do we need to do it? Do we need to offer extensions on things? Do we need to negotiate with DOL on certain things? How are things working with Georgia DOL? And so there's a lot of questions out there right now that folks have top of mind. We don't have a lot of answers, and because the answers just aren't there yet. But I do think that having a little bit more structure around this environment in our August meeting, I think is a good thing for us to do. So I am going to ask that everybody please continue to block off that time or protect that date that we have out there, so that we'll have some more structured conversations around these various topics. As you think of things, please submit those to us, whether to myself or to Kristen or Nia or Jodan, to let us know what's on your mind, and we can begin working on an agenda that will capture some of those things. But when it goes to mission and vision, purpose, how's the budget going? What does our unemployment look like? Things are still going to be flowing in around that time. And while we may not have all the answers, if we begin thinking about it now, it'll at least put us in a position to be able to figure out what we should or could be doing during this time. And so I know that the executive committee members, many of them have been asking questions and want to bring some things to the table to assist us. So right now we're open to that, and love to get your thoughts and ideas. Part of what makes you the strong leaders you are in the state of Georgia is your commitment to serving the citizens. And so your thought leadership is extremely critical at this point in time. So if you're seeing things or hearing things that might be worthwhile for us to think about or at least explore, we want to do that. Keep in mind too that we're trying to balance this with the workload that's being placed on the team right now. And so, like I said before, a lot of the local areas are working extremely hard, serving and trying to figure out how to better serve, and all in the with the constraints of a budget that's been reduced. And so we've got to be smart about how we go about doing this. So with all these things converging together, we're just going to try to make sure that we are doing the most effective job we can to address opportunities, as well at the same time serve the citizens or participants. And so we'll more to come on that, and you may see some things come out from myself to y'all here in preparation for that meeting in August. So again, any thoughts or ideas, we're all ears. We'd love to hear from you. So are there any other announcements, Nia, Kristen, Jodan, that we need to make?
We're working on this side, sir, but just another reminder to the executive committee, we will need to schedule a date in June with you guys to review budget. But besides that, we're all good from here.
Well, very good. Well, for our first meeting like this virtual meeting, utilizing WebEx, and I saw many of the faces. Quite honestly, I'd like to see a few more. So please don't be shy or bashful. Log in next time so we can see you, because that's part of the benefit of doing it through video is now you to be able to see the friends. And so please do, because we'd love to see you as well as hear you. And I appreciate Nia, Kristen, Jodan for your support and get us up and running. I know Steve and all y'all, you've worked really hard to make this happen, and we appreciate your time in setting this up for us and helping us to keep things flowing. And I know we'll be, I look forward to interacting with GWLA here in the near future. I'm probably going to use a similar format at their meeting if they hopefully have it set up to work with allow us to do that. And we'll be hearing more from the local areas as well. But folks, it's been really good to see us make adjustments and to keep serving. And I know that as we go, whatever the situation is that we're facing here in Georgia, we'll be working on it together. If there are no other announcements, did I miss anything?
Wendell, this is Chuck. Is August 13th the next date that we're looking at? August 13th?
That's a good question. I probably should know that.
Confirming. Yeah, we're confirming this. 1 second. Yes, it is August 13th, Thursday, August 13th.
Okay. Thanks, Chuck. We'll, like I said, we'll require a little bit more time to do a virtual retreat in a sense, which means that we might do a survey before, show results, but anyway, just look for some opportunity for us to engage more as a board. Any other questions or announcements before I conclude, or do we have a motion? Well, first of all, any other questions or announcements? All right, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All right.
Thanks, Karen. I'll second.
All right. Any question, discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All right. Any opposed? All right. Motion carries, folks. Thank you again for meeting today. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. And we look forward to seeing you next time.